Billy Graham used to tell a wonderful story about when he visited a small town and was looking for the post office to mail a letter. So in looking for the post office, he saw a young boy and he asked him for the directions to the post office. And so the boy gave him the directions, and then Billy Graham turned to him and he said, you should come to church tonight and you can learn how to get into heaven. The boy quickly replied, I don't think I'll come. And Graham said, why not? He said, you don't even know you went to the post office. We all lose our way at some point along life's journey. And when we do, we find ourselves sometimes overwhelmed with an urgency to find our way back home. Today's story about the prodigal son is about homecoming. That yearning we all hold deep within ourselves to return to that place, wherever that may be, where we are most at home with those we love and hold dear, knowing that we are loved in return. Such is the dream of God for all of us, for all of creation, where we are warmly embraced by God's audacious and abundant love, adored as a beloved child of God. Jesus is speaking to the Pharisees in this story, who are appalled that Jesus and his followers dine and keep company with prostitutes and tax collectors, which is code for the low life in Palestine society. And anyone worth their salt, any good Jew, would stay clear of it, but not Jesus and his disciples. This particular story is the last of 3 stories about how God rejoices when we find what has been lost. Be it be looking for a lost sheep, rummaging for a lost coin, or waiting for the return of a lost son. God celebrates when we find what we treasure most in our hearts, restoring our relationships with God and our loved ones through the incredible power of God's reconciling love. The brilliance and the power of the parable is that we can all find ourselves someplace within the story. It reflects the real-life drama of a family struggling to find its way through complicated relationships between a parent and 2 siblings. Yeah, this was a shocking story for Jesus' followers or audience to hear because of the extremely unconventional behavior of the father. In ancient Palestinian society, it was a great insult and a sign of disrespect for a young son to ask for his father, the patriarch of the family, for his share of his inheritance. Unlike going to the bank for a check or making a withdrawal from an ATM, the father had to first sell off a portion of his land, which was his inheritance, and then several of his livestock. The young son's request for his inheritance was as good as wishing his father dead. And yet, the father concedes and gives the son his share. Well, we know the story. The young man squanders all his inheritance and nearly starves to death tending swine, which reveals how far he has fallen. No observant Jew at that time would be caught anywhere near swine. Yet, where the pig slop was better than he had to eat, that's where he found himself. And that's when he decides to go home. On his journey homeward, the young boy rehearses over and over in his mind his speech, asking for his father's forgiveness and wanting nothing more than return as one of his father's servants. Unexpectedly, as the father is looking off in the distance, he sees this young son coming down the road. And without a moment's hesitation, the father runs down the dusty road in his sandals and his robe flopping in the wind to meet this young boy. As the son begins this much rehearsed speech, the father grabs him and embraces him and simply holds him tight. The father hasn't heard a word the young son says. He cares only about one thing. His son is home. Yet, this is not how a patriarch in first century Palestine behaves. To leave his home and run down to the road to embrace a child that had just wished him dead defies all convention. Yet nothing can stop the father from rejoicing over the return of his son, whom he loves beyond measure. That night, the father puts on a great feast, invites all the neighbors to celebrate the young son's return, treating him like royalty, giving him an expensive robe and the family signet ring. Missing from the party is the older son. He has just finished a hard day work in the fields, and he is sweaty and bone-tired. He hears this music and laughter from inside and wonders what is going on. Again, disregarding any hint of propriety or dignity, the father rushes out to greet his oldest son and begs him to be part of the celebration, to welcome his brother home. However, the elder brother's angry reaction is not surprising. It's easy to empathize with his resentment. Like many firstborn children, he is the responsible one, the dutiful and reliable one. Yet he feels his father has taken advantage of him and treated him shallowly. Filled with bitterness, it is not how his father can be so forgiving and generous with his wastrel brother while showing no appreciation for how diligent and loyal he has been all these years. Sadly, the elder son's anger blinds him, and he fails to see the incredible depth and breadth of his father's love, his compassion, and forgiveness. Will the elder son have a change of heart in time? Will the younger son remain home? Or will he go off again? Jesus' parable is open-ended and leaves it hanging. And I think that's what Jesus intended. Our job is to work out the ending for ourselves. This is an opportunity for us to place ourselves within the story. Maybe even expand the roles to include sisters and a mother. Wherever we find ourselves in the story, the parable reveals God's outlandish love, no matter how confused and lost we may be, restoring broken relationships and making them whole again. A friend of mine, Scott Stoner, a priest and psychologist, suggests one way to reconnect and build relationships is to ask 3 questions. It can be with your children or your spouse, sitting around the dinner table, or with friends over a cup of coffee, or keeping your own personal journal. Number 1, how are you brave today? How did you face a challenge with courage? Maybe it's asking a friend for help, or maybe facing a serious health issue, or maybe asking a friend for forgiveness. It's so important for us to acknowledge and celebrate when we rise to the challenge and are brave. Number 2, how are you kind today? Did you reach out to help someone that needed encouragement or helping hand? Were you understanding with maybe a busy store clerk? Did you make an effort to make a new person feel welcome? Maybe at church, or a meeting, a class. Number 3, how did you fail today? This question recognizes our human frailties and how challenging life can be. We are not perfect, and we often fall short of the mark when we attempt to do so. Maybe we could have used this extra money we hadn't expected to help out someone in need. Or maybe we said something hurtful or insensitive to a friend, a spouse, a coworker. Maybe we failed at being a better parent, son or daughter or spouse. No matter our failures, we can always learn from them and begin again. When it comes down to it, life is about relationships. It's about reaching out to God when we are lost and confused. The challenge is, can we accept God's love and forgiveness? Dare we trust God enough to surrender our love as God's beloved? This is the path Jesus invites us to follow. The path that will lead us home, where we are all welcomed, embraced, just as we are, as a beloved child of God. Amen.